started when I was very small. In part, it was due to the education my parents provided at home. My mother never attended university. She's a farm girl. My father, also from farming background, but he earned a doctorate in chemistry. And despite their differences in education, they fell in love and had a family and 6 children. So I was the second of the 6. And we learned a lot at home before we even entered school because they would take a lot of time to read to us when we were small children. So Mother would read from the Bible and all the great children's books. And Dad would teach us math and science. We knew all our numbers. We knew simple mathematics. And he would take my brothers and me to his laboratory where we'd do simple experiments. These weren't really experiments. They were simple demonstrations. A beaker with a colorless solution. Add a drop of acid, it turns pink. When you're a child, it's amazing. Of course, it was adding a drop of acid to a colorless solution with an indicator dye. There was a basis to the magic, and we understood this. But I think more important than the subject matter was the fact that my dad was my hero. He was a scientist. And when we were about 8 years old in school, and my brothers and sisters and I all went to the public schools, we had wonderful teachers. But one day I remember my teacher asked me to draw, all of us, to draw a picture of us when we grew up, what we would do with our lives when we became adults. And I drew a picture of a chemist with test tubes at a laboratory bench because I wanted to be like my dad. I thought that was really wonderful work. Although I noticed beside me, my friend Jay Peterson, his father was a professor of biology. And Jay was drawing a picture of a burglar. I always wondered, did Jay become a politician or a lawyer? No, he actually became a biologist like his father also. Now, this little Norwegian town we lived in was very special because the King of Norway would come every year. And we'd sit on the hillsides waving our Norwegian flags. It was very idyllic. Now, on an October afternoon, 51 years ago, I remember distinctly that my life changed. I was 8 years old, and Dad came to get my brothers and me. We were playing football on the meadow across from our home. And while he was walking us home, we were going home for dinner, he explained that the news had a very interesting and concerning report. The news on the radio indicated that the Soviet Union had launched a satellite known as Sputnik. Now, at that time, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was regarded as our enemy. And they had just achieved the first victory in the space race to launch a satellite. Now, I didn't realize the significance that afternoon, but in fact, the launching of Sputnik by the Soviets caused a change in the society in the United States, and probably in Western Europe as well. It was only 12 years after the end of World War II. The United States was recovered. Europe was still recovering. But it was realized by our government that we were really behind in science and engineering. Education needed to improve. And the public invested heavily. both political parties, all government groups, industry, everyone agreed we needed to put more emphasis on education, particularly science, mathematics, engineering education. And that investment is still paying dividends today, 51 years later. Now, first, our daily lives changed because science became present on television. Television had just been introduced. And the most popular show was the Disney show. Walt Disney had a show on Sunday nights, and it was very interesting because it reflected the composition of Disneyland. One week they would have a cartoon, Fantasyland, Donald Duck, Pluto. Another week it would be Frontierland, Davy Crockett. Third week would be Adventureland, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn. And the fourth week would be Tomorrowland, which was science and technology. And so the children of America, and probably some in Europe were able to see tapes of this, but the children of America were able to spend Sunday evening listening to scientists, people like Wernher von Braun. Von Braun was the head of NASA. He would talk about the missile program, the space program. Science was recognized such that all of us knew the name of Jonas Salk, the pioneer who developed the polio vaccine. So science was really part of daily life in the United States. Now, the investment in science allowed my father, who was a college professor, to write a government grant to do a sabbatical. And this sabbatical was undertaken at the University of California, Berkeley, which was all the way across the country. But for us as children, this was a great adventure. We loaded up our old station wagon, and we must have looked like the Beverly Hillbillies or something, because we had our camping gear on the top. We had a wonderful adventure. And we spent a year in Berkeley, California, where the entire community was focused around science. And there were really great scientists who lived there, and they became our family friends. And these individuals were not only invested in science in the laboratory, but science in terms of public life. Now, when John F. Kennedy was inaugurated as president, he soon thereafter focused his administration on science and technology, announcing that they would launch a program to put a man on the moon within a decade. Now, amongst the friends of Dad was a man named Linus Pauling, a great chemist. You may know his name. He's one of only 4 individuals ever to win 2 Nobel Prizes. One for chemistry, for the structure of molecules, and the other was for peace. And maybe the Peace Prize was even more important, because Pauling used his celebrity as a Nobel laureate to lecture on science and also to lecture on the need for nuclear disarmament. Now, those of you who are my age, I'm almost 60, will remember the 1950s, because while science and technology was emerging, there was a downside to the science because of the development of nuclear weapons. And hydrogen bombs were being tested in the atmosphere in Nevada, in the United States, in Siberia, in the deserts in China, of larger and larger magnitude. And the fallout, the nuclear radioactive fallout, was spreading around the world. So Pauling took it upon himself to raise the public awareness by lecturing on the dangers of nuclear testing, and took every possible opportunity to raise the awareness. Now, interestingly, on one event, he was invited to the White House, where President Kennedy hosted a dinner to honor all of the American Nobel laureates. This was a first And Kennedy later recalled the evening in the White House where all the Nobel laureates were present as being the occasion where the greatest concentration of intellect and human knowledge ever to be in the White House since Thomas Jefferson was there all alone, our greatest, smartest president. Pauling used the occasion, however, to lead a protest that afternoon on the sidewalk outside of the White House with a big placard. The placard said, "Mr. President, we have no right to test." Now, as children, we were enthralled. This was on the television. Dad's friend Linus Pauling on the news leading a protest. And it was effective. That evening when he entered the White House for the reception, he waited in line with his wife to come to the front of the line where he met President Kennedy. And President Kennedy, he had a great sense of humor. And he turned to Pauling with a smile on his face. He said, "Professor Pauling, I understand you've been around here earlier today." Everybody knew it was on the television. But he signed the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which ended the testing of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere. So I think that it was a wonderful example. Now, being a typical young boy, however, there are limits to how much emphasis on science you can really absorb. And it was really the teachers that continued our interest in science. Our leaders in the Boy Scouts took us camping. And I remember one teacher in particular, Mr. Hughes, a male teacher in the small children's schools, the elementary schools, was uncommon. Mr. Hughes had a great sense of humor, and he had a favorite record he would play to us. And this record was a recording of the songs of Tom Lehrer, a Harvard mathematician who had a part-time career as a nightclub musician, sort of like Berlusconi in reverse. So Lehrer was famous for some of these, non-political. Lehrer was famous for some of his songs because they were about a variety of current events, including a song of the chemical elements. Does anybody know the song of the chemical elements? Leslie, would you like to come up here? I will try to do my best to sing the song of the chemical elements. And if you listen carefully, you might hear 102 chemical elements to a tune that vaguely resembles the song of the Major General from the Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan. There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium. You don't have to translate this part. Europium, zirconium, lutetium, vanadium, and lanthanum, and osmium, and acetine, and radium, and gold, and protactinium, and indium, and gallium, and iodine, and thorium, and thulium, and thallium. There's yttrium, ytterbium, actinium, rubidium, and boron, gadolinium, niobium, iridium, and strontium, and silicon, and silver, and samarium, and bismuth, bromine, lithium, beryllium, and barium. There's holmium and hafnium and holmium and hafnium and something and herbium and manganese and mercury, molybdenum, magnesium, dysprosium and scandium and cerium and cesium. There's lead, praseodymium and platinum, plutonium, palladium, promethium, potassium, polonium, and tantalum, technetium, titanium, tellurium, and cadmium and calcium and chromium and curium. Mixed up that part. There's sulfur, californium, and fermium, berkelium, and also mendelevium, einsteinium, nobelium, and argon, krypton, neon, radon, xenon, zinc, and rhodium, chlorine, carbon, cobalt, copper, tungsten, tin, and sodium. Those are the elements they know about at Harvard. But those who study chemistry at Bergamo in Italy will unanimously agree that others were discovered. So, you know, science wasn't always so serious. My apologies to the late Pavarotti.